The knife is an ESEE 3 uncoated. It's a model that I was interested in for general use carry, not so much camping or bushcraft or anything, but just as a general carry fixed blade. When I received the knife, I noticed that right away I noticed that the ergos were good on it. Also, the blade is thin. It's thinner than other ESEEs. It's a full flat grind. The finger choil is fine. It almost feels like it's going to be too small, but it's not. It works. The knife comes with linen micarta scales, which I was a little bit hesitant on because I wasn't in some of the pictures you see where they're selling this knife, the scales look white. So I went ahead and ordered the canvas micarta scales as well, thinking that I would want to switch to something darker, but when I got the knife and used it a little bit, the linen micarta scales were fine. Now, that's fine. I don't mind having an extra pair of scales around, but I noticed that the texturing on the linen micarta actually felt a little bit grippier than the canvas micarta, which was something that I wasn't sure of before. I didn't know that there was a difference, but there definitely is a difference there, and quite frankly, I like the linen micarta better. So with the sheath with this knife that comes stock, it's an olive drab sheath, and I really wasn't looking for that. That's not a color that I want hanging off me as I carry it. So with this knife, I went ahead and I ordered a black sheath with it. You know, same sheath made by ESEE. I ordered the black sheath and the back plate. And when I got it, I went to put it together to carry this knife, and the back plate, the screw holes didn't fit the screw holes on the black sheath. I ordered it from a place that one of the better known dealers on the internet. I mean, it's a huge place that sells knives. I'm not going to say the name of it, but I did contact them afterwards, and they said I could send it in and get a refund for it. So, but I thought it was worth mentioning that the back plate didn't match. That, you know, it was off. I couldn't get all 4 screws through. So when that didn't work out, I went ahead and I had a custom Kydex sheath made for the knife. This is a sheath from Extreme Edge Custom Kydex, which is a company that I've watched come along on the groups. I've watched the progress of the company over the last year or two and been interested in working with them. I talked to several different sheath makers for this knife, and Extreme Edge Custom Kydex was the one that I decided to go with. Not only because I mean, I've been wanting to work with them anyway, but the price, competitive, you know, price-wise, they were the best option. And I'm really happy with this sheath. It's well made. It looks nice. It seems plenty strong enough. The retention on it is great. I mean, knife isn't going anywhere, and yet when you draw the knife out of the sheath, it comes out effortlessly. Even without the scales to match up here, the knife still has retention in the sheath. But like I said, when you draw the knife, it seems effortless. It just comes out for you. I talked to the owner of Extreme Edge Custom Kydex about that, and I said, is that something that you do on purpose, making the retention just at the point where the knife won't shake out, but no farther than that? And he said yes. And I thought that was interesting. It made me think of when you think about edge geometry and cutting efficiency, and you take the edge down just above the point of failure. You know, you want the knife for the intended use. You want it just above the point of failure, and that gives the highest cutting efficiency. And I thought that was interesting from a sheath making point of view, which I don't have any point of view on. I'm not a sheath maker, but to have the retention just above the point where the knife won't shake out of the sheath, just above the point where it will stay in, I thought that was an interesting aspect to it. It was something I hadn't thought of before getting this sheath and trying it out and sitting down and thinking about it. So I needed to sharpen the knife, and I went ahead and reprofiled it to 30 inclusive. Initially, I reprofiled it to 30 inclusive. And then I patinaed the blade. This is an uncoated blade in 1095, so I wanted an old, worn look to the knife. I mean, that was what I had in mind going into it. So I went ahead and patinaed the blade, and I used cider vinegar for that. And then I sharpened it out. Now, this initial sharpening was weeks back, maybe a few months back, and I don't have all the footage from it. Most of the work was done using the knife, using the stone on a table and working on it that way. And then I took it out through strops, and I took it out to probably 0.025 micron. The edge that came up on the knife from that sharpening was beautiful, and it did an unbelievable job at taking a high sharpness. I was really happy with it, and I got some great footage from all that. I posted the footage on the group, so one of the guys on the groups said he'd never seen somebody feather stick a hair. So that was great, and I went to do the review for the knife, and I went to cut plastic strapping, and the edge immediately rolled. And I was really surprised at that. So I thought, all right, maybe this, I mean, the plastic strapping was pretty thin. It was less than a zip tie, but I thought, okay, well, let me try working on wood. Maybe this plastic strapping is just overly aggressive. And I went to work on wood, and that too made the edge roll. So I resharpened the knife the same way that I had, and went back to the wood, and again, the edge rolled. So I called ESEE, and I ended up talking to Mike Perrin. He seemed like a nice guy. I talked to him, and he said, maybe it's ground too thin, or maybe you've got a problem with the steel. So I reprofiled it back to 35 inclusive and continued working with it, and it was still rolling. It wasn't rolling as bad as before, but it was still rolling. Now keep in mind, through all this, I'm working on store-bought pine. It's not like I was batoning with it or doing something crazy. I was just trying to shave pieces off of store-bought pine, and that was causing the rolling. Something that at 30 inclusive doesn't happen in 01 tool steel. C100, which is what Mora uses in some of their knives, at 25 inclusive with a micro bevel, it was a factory edge, didn't cause any rolling. S30V at 30 inclusive didn't have any rolling or chipping on this wood. So I thought it was really strange, and I figured it was a knife. So I went ahead and sent the knife into ESEE, and they Rockwelled the knife for me, and it came out at 56. So Mike called me back, and he told me that, and he said, we're gonna reprofile the knife back to 40, and we're gonna send it back to you. And I said, you know what, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. So they reprofiled the knife, and they sent it back, and they did a good job at reprofiling the knife. I was surprised, pleasantly surprised at how well they did with that. They sent the knife back, and I got it, and I figured I would test it again, and I wasn't really sure what I would run into with that. So when I got the knife back, I had bought an Azula 2, which, ESEE uses 40 inclusive as their factory angle. So I thought, what, same steel, same sharpening, more or less, from the factory, same angle. I'll go ahead and test the two, one against the other, and just see. Not a real extensive test, but just see if I find any more failure in the ESEE 3. So I did that, and I didn't see any more failure. It was fine. It held up fine. Now, you could make the argument that I had ground it too thin, that 30 inclusive is too thin. I don't believe that. I think that there was probably an issue with the steel, maybe a burnt edge, and enough steel got removed through being reprofiled multiple times and sharpened multiple times that the steel that was damaged was gone. So at any rate, the steel was good. It was fine. So I thought, all right, I need to. I wanted to do some cutting with the knife and show that. So, the knife was fine. The edge was holding up fine. Like I said, the ergos for it are great. I wanted to compare the canvas micarta and the linen micarta for myself. So I went ahead and did that, and I wet both my cartas. You hear people talk about them getting grippier when they're wet, and I wanted to see that for myself. So in doing cutting on a very wet, nasty day, I went ahead and, instead of just relying on the elements, I went ahead and threw water on both and worked with them that way. They both do become grippier when wet. There's no slipping about it. So after doing that little test, just to see for myself, just to have a side by side, dry to wet, linen and canvas. The blade had gotten some rust on it, which was fine. It gave me an opportunity to take it off. I wouldn't normally. The barkeeper's friend is something that I keep around. It's not a product that I would normally turn to initially, but it was what I had. I was running low on other things, so I went ahead and used that. Just damped it, took a paper towel, made it damp, put some barkeeper's friend on it, and worked with that, and it took the corrosion right off the blade. Now the other thing that it did was it took the patina off the blade, so I needed to re-patina the blade. This time I thought I'd get some footage of it. Again, I used cider vinegar for it. I just took a water bottle, cut the top off, something big enough that I could get the whole knife into it, dropped the knife in and filled it up, and I let it sit for 20 minutes. After taking it out, I always immediately rinse the blade off and dry it. Seems as if I leave it sit with the vinegar on there, the patina continues, and I don't like that. I like to stop it where it's at. So that's how I go about it. Now for this, the handle was going to be darker, but it doesn't matter. It's covered up, and it's a little added protection for it. So that was that. Blade was fine, and it was repatinaed. I needed to sharpen the knife again. The factory edge is rough, and I wasn't sure how I was going to go about it. I didn't want to spend too much time on it. The first time around, I had used a lot of different stones and put a lot of time in on it. I decided to try and make it a shorter ordeal this time. So I used 3 different stones. All were water stones. I started with a 1,000 grit King water stone. I worked on that. After the 1,000 grit King, I moved on to a 6,000 grit King. It was just a double-sided stone. After working with the 6,000 grit King, I moved on to a 12,000 grit Shapton ceramic water stone. I worked with that, and with all 3 stones, I was holding them in hand. I didn't plan on doing the sharpening that way. I was really thinking about going about it a different way, but when I got down to it, I just picked the stone up and started going that way, and that's just what felt comfortable. So after the 12,000 grit Shapton, I moved on to strops. All the stropping was done on wood. I started with a 5 micron, moved on to a 3.5 micron, then a 1 micron, then a half micron, and then I moved on to a 1/4 micron, 0.05 micron, and 0.025 micron. And with the 1/4 micron through 0.025 micron, there was a little bit of back and forth between leather strops and wood, but the majority of it was done on wood, and that's how it was finished. So at the end of all that, the edge was sharp like I wanted it to be. Wasn't many issues with that. The steel is a little bit difficult. It doesn't take a high sharpness as well as some of the high carbide steels, but you can still do it. And after the fact, I worked on pine again just to see if there was any issues with edge stability, and there wasn't. So I went ahead and left the knife at 40 inclusive. It's a good model. It's a model that I like. Like I said, just for general use, it's got good tip strength. It's not a model that you'd want to pry with, but it holds up plenty well enough. It you can step up to an SE4 and get a substantially thicker stock, but the SE3 is a good knife, and I think it's an interesting design given the SE line.